Good morning, everybody from DawgsHQ. I'm Jake Rowe. He's Rusty Mansell, and we're here to talk Georgia football, transfer portal, recruiting. Shoot us some questions in the comments. We need them, we want them, but we got a lot to talk about here, Rusty. And I wrote a story yesterday discussing how Georgia is the transfer portal board is starting to take a little bit of shape now. I mean, we knew it would as time went on. Yesterday marked the 10-day period that the portal had been open, so we're still only a third of the way through this thing. Right now, as you look at the transfer portal, and we've seen Georgia guys go in, and they're not done going in, who would be the guy you feel the best about maybe ending up at Georgia at this point?
London Humphreys.
Yeah.
Vanderbilt wide receiver. A lot of Travis Etienne, a lot of talk about him as well and how close that is with Georgia. And most people you talk to feels like that's trending that way. So here's one thing I want to mention. The portal has been crazy active for 10 days now. It's insane. When these teams start playing their bowl games, that's when it's going to be another huge rush of this thing. So, teams, especially, some of these good teams, including maybe Georgia, but when these teams get back from these bowl games, it's going to be on, because that's when the real conversation is going to start taking place. So that's around the country too. So if Georgia, I think Georgia fans maybe look at this and go, here's the questions. What's up with the D line? What's up with the D line? There's some D linemen that's going to go in this portal. They're not in that portal right now. And that's a lot left. What do you say? There's a lot of meat left on that bone. There's a lot left there.
Yeah, and I mean, and listen, I heard from a source yesterday that Georgia's involved with several defensive linemen right now. Yeah. We may not know them. None of them may not be even takes yet. But Georgia's been in contact with some defensive linemen. You can put everything you got on that. And there's going to be there. I mean, we know about Xavier McLeod, but Rusty, it seems, you mentioned, you mentioned London Humphreys, and that's been one that's been out there since the jump. You mentioned Trevor Etienne. It's seeming like, as it kind of wears on, and it feels like it's developing slowly, but again, we're only here 10 days into it. It seems to me like you're starting to kind of get an idea of some clearer targets, as time rolls on here. And, obviously, like I said, Xavier McLeod is a guy that was on campus last weekend. Michael Jackson III from USC was on campus last weekend. Can't sit here and say I think he's a massive frontline target for him just yet. Jake Roos came in with a report yesterday that Georgia's involved with another portal wide receiver. And Rusty, would not shock me at all to see Georgia make a big run at Colby Young out of Miami, 6'5", 215 pounds. They don't have that guy in that room right now.
No, it's kind of like that Javon Wims type guy, that bigger guy that you can
Lawrence Cager.
You can win a big one-on-one battle because of body size. And that's a name. I'm going to do some notes here. I'm looking at my phone. I'm going to do some notes here probably in the next hour and a half on DawgsHQ. And we got a couple names I'm expecting in town this weekend. And,
okay.
One or two you might be familiar with, and one I'm certainly familiar with because I covered him. And interesting name, interesting position. And I kind of like the fit if Georgia can land this one. So, here it is. We're second weekend of visits, and it's still crazy to me that we're not really doing high school visits. We're doing high school visits because they're going to practice this weekend. Daniel Calhoun played in the state championship last night. Dude's beat up. Dude's tired. He just played 15 games of high school football, and he's going to go home today. He's going to probably sleep in, hurt a little bit. He's going to pack his stuff up. He's going to be in Athens Friday night. Ryan Puglisi is going to be in Athens Friday night. It's go time for those guys. There's no more OVs. It's time to get a playbook and get your locker.
This question right here, I've seen this will pop up several times lately. It seems like Georgia's going to stand pat as far as high school wide receivers in this class.
Yeah, not doing high school unless it's something crazy pops up. But and I don't blame them. I mean, Georgia's in the portal, man, at wide receiver. And that is the deepest position there is. Period. And it's the position that's been producing. You look at wide receiver. I'm telling you, man, these high school kids it is what it is. And we could have another hour conversation on that, but teams aren't messing around anymore. They're going straight to that. wide receiver portal, because number one, you've seen game tape, you've seen the guy in action, and there's no better kind of eval to watch a collegiate game tape, a wide receiver. That's where Georgia's going right now. They're not messing around with high school much at all.
Yeah, and I don't blame them. I mean, it's one of those spots to me. It's almost receiver has been so emphasized to this point. It's almost getting to the point where it's almost on the same level in some ways as offensive and defensive line. I think you still have a higher hit rate at receiver coming out of high school because, listen, it's speed, it's hands, it's ability to track the ball.
Yep.
But you're seeing a lot of elite guys, a lot of really good athletes come out of high school, and it's still taking them some time before they're actually getting there because these offenses are kind of tough to learn. People are going more pro style. I feel like getting a proven commodity, a guy who's been out there a couple of years and can come in and produce for you right away, that just makes a lot of sense. There's a maturity level involved with it too. That's sometimes I think there's a de-recruitment that goes on with high school kids where, hey man, I ran posts and goes and caught screens and I didn't really block in high school. And then you go out and get a guy who's been there around a couple of years and he's willing to do all that.
Yeah, the ones that adapt to that quicker are the ones that play. But Georgia's got Nitro Truggle and trying to hold on to him right now. LSU's a team obviously involved there, but got Sokovie White, a kid that I think Georgia fans are absolutely going to love. And they tried on a few other. I think they tried on a few other high. And I really do think that high school is the priority still for Georgia.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
But when you look at how this class unfolded, and one of the names that's particularly brought up there, I think Georgia made decisions like we're not taking any chances. Like we have questions right here. We're going to the portal and we're getting a kid that we feel comfortable in our eval. And, that's kind of where they are at wide receiver. I think Georgia's going to be fine at wide receiver. I think they're going to end up with a couple guys in this class. And London Humphreys is a guy that, that's another guy they really need, man, with that speed. And, that's a guy I expect to end up at Georgia.
Something we pride ourselves on at DawgsHQ is we're not overreactionists. We don't like. I don't feel like we're overly emotional or fly off the handle about anything. But man, I cannot say enough, Rusty. Every day, with each passing day, you hear more stuff about London Humphreys that makes you think, dang, man, no wonder Georgia was on him immediately out of the portal. You hear some stuff from the Vanderbilt side. You hear some stuff from people who just know the kid and saw him play in high school, or you hear stuff from the Georgia side. And this kid's an elite athlete. Like, I'm not saying he's the fastest kid in the country because he's fast. 10,600 meters is moving. But I'm talking about a multi-sport, track the football, big, strong. I mean, that's another thing I heard yesterday is he's 6'2", 6'3", 195 to 200 pounds, but he's strong as hell. Like he is a physical kid. And those are just all good things, you like to hear about a guy that Georgia very much leads for coming out of the transfer portal.
Yeah, I like the multi-sport athlete too. I mean, we could go on and on about things like that, but we got years of data of multi-sport athletes. So he's there.
Yeah, absolutely. One other thing I did want to touch on out of the transfer portal right now, Rusty, is when as we look at it and we see, who Georgia's targeting and who they're going after. When you look at the defensive line, and I know that's kind of everybody's concern right now, what would you say is kind of the number one priority for Georgia within the defensive line, kind of getting it down on more of a micro level? Do you think it's nose? Do you think it's interior in general? How do you look at that?
You got to have a nose and got to have two, and they got to have two interior guys, and they got to have some. Let me show my age though. Wendy's commercial, "Where's the beef?" That's Georgia's got to have that anchor, and they got to have a guy that's ready to play right now. They don't have a guy that they don't have to have. Nazir Stackhouse. Let me say a couple things about this, and you've seen clips all over social media. Did he get his ass whipped at times against Alabama? He did, but he also had some good plays. And you know what Nazir Stackhouse was forced to do? He was forced to play a lot more plays than he usually plays. And what does that tell you? It tells you lack of depth right there. Georgia didn't play Jordan Davis 45 plays a game. They played Jordan Davis 25 or less. And they knew max effort out of a big man is where they are. You start talking about getting into 40 plays with a nose guard, and you're asking for trouble against Alabama. And that's what happened. So, to me, they've got to have a big body interior guy. I think they got to have help on the inside tackles. I'm not really worried about the outside guys right now. I think they got some guys that can play. If this roster doesn't change, because it can change in a heartbeat, I think they're 5 techniques, a couple guys that need to step in there, but I like where they are there. Tough loss yesterday with Marvin Jones Jr., and that's what happens, man, when you have a Jalen Walker. Jalen Walker's a third down pass rusher. You know what I mean? And is what it is. They got Damon Wilson, they got Impemba, they got these guys in behind there. So it happens. And so you look at those guys. Gabe Harris is a let me tell you something. You want to tuck one away, tuck Gabe Harris away.
Yeah.
Because that kid's going to be really good at Georgia, and he's going to play next year. Talked with someone yesterday, very familiar with this Georgia football team. And I just said, hey, they said, listen, Gabe Harris can freaking go. So there's another young defensive lineman I think is going good. But right now for Georgia, they got to have some beef, and they got to have some guys that can play right now, because Georgia opens up and Mercedes-Benz against Clemson, and they don't get any easier as that schedule goes on. They have got to have some help in the middle.
Quick stat for you. Nazir Stackhouse, through 13 games this year, played more snaps than Jordan Davis played in 15 games in 2021.
Yeah, man.
It's only 10 more snaps, but if you throw 2 more games of 30 to 35 plus more snaps on that starts to paint that picture that you're talking about. And, Christian Miller kind of tried to help out at nose tackle there a little bit. Not really, I don't think his optimal spot.
It's not his size, but I tell you what I like. Christian Miller as the year went on, getting off blocks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's that guy that can win. He got pressure. You got to have pressure sometimes when you don't dial it up. Like, you need that D lineman to win a one-on-one. And Christian Miller did that a couple of times, and that's what really flashed with him. We saw it in high school. He needed a year. He needed a year to get strength and condition. He needed all that kind of stuff. Well, it's go time for Christian Miller, and he'll be a big part of the puzzle. But I still think they need – when Georgia's been really good, what have they had on defense in the middle?
They've had a big dude.
Yeah, it don't have to be an NFL first rounder. There's not many of those Jordan Davises coming.
John Atkins was tremendous at it.
Yeah, I think Jamal Jarrett's going to be a player too that's going to take that step. I think he needed to get his weight under control. I think he needed to learn how to practice at the pace at the University of Georgia. I don't mean I'm giving up on him, and don't mean he can't be that guy. But I think Georgia needs some depth, and they need to add another guy in the middle right there, another anchor that can play. And I'm confident that they're watching that portal, and if one goes in like that, they're going to be all over it.
No doubt about it. And I do want to point out this too. It wasn't just the defensive line. I mean, it wasn't just, Nazir Stackhouse or Warren Brentz or Zion Logue or any of those guys. It was, listen, Georgia wasn't healthy at linebacker, and the fact they weren't healthy at linebacker, they ended up being young at linebacker. And it was a kind of a convergence of things, and still was a very good defense. Just wasn't up to what it has been the past few years. And that's a big part of it. Rusty, obviously got to hit on this because this is going to be news until it ain't. Ben Barrup says, do y'all think Bobo visited Raiola just to keep the relationship? Should he transfer in a year or two? Listen, I think Georgia's always playing the long game, but something I think fans would do well to slow down and realize is when you spend as much time talking to these kids as these coaches do, A, they're not just going to give up because they've put a lot of time and effort into it, but B, they genuinely like them. They genuinely appreciate them and build genuine relationships with them. It's the only way to recruit. You don't recruit on fake relationships. And, you get to know people. And there's no doubt in my mind, Mike Bobo was at Buford High School yesterday enjoying himself to an extent. I mean, even if good or bad news, I don't care, but enjoying himself, spending time with a guy that he's gotten to know really, really well over the past year.
You walk in there yesterday, if you're Mike Bobo, and you got questions.
Yeah.
And you need to know. And it's man to man. It's go time. You know what I mean? Say this. Dylan Raiola was scheduled to be at Georgia Saturday at lunch. You're going to get a playbook. You're going to do a team run, and you're going to be a part of this program. He's going to be in Lincoln, Nebraska. And like you said, when you recruit a kid for 2 years and you invest that time, you get one last chance to maybe get in front of him. You go over there and you ask questions, and that's part of it. And, whatever comes of it, comes of it. But, Georgia's not been successful recruiting, just wiping their hands clean and say, all right, do what you need to do. They went over there, I'm sure, had some questions and had a conversation. I do know they had a conversation, at least. And who knows what happened. But, man, to me, when he goes to Nebraska this weekend, that tells me a lot of what's going on. And Like there's a lot of stuff going. Had an uncle there. His uncle's coaches there. His uncle got a new contract last week, an extension. So confident his uncle's going to be there on that staff. Dad was All-American there. A lot of ties, and we could go on and on about that. But I would imagine that Mike Bobo sat down with him, had some questions, wanted to hear what you got to say. And Mike Bobo is behind the scenes. He's not one of those BS guys. He'll get to the point on some questions. I'm confident in that. And it is what it is now. And he'll be in Nebraska this weekend, and I fully expect him probably land in their class.
Yeah, may not come back.
May not come back because
may go to Lincoln and not come back.
He can enroll there. I mean, he can do the practice thing and do the team run and all that type of stuff. So we'll see if he comes out of this weekend.
Go ahead and start working out for the Cornhuskers. Listen, I think we've been honest with you. That's what we expect to happen. Now, doesn't mean that something can't change, but ultimately, I think we get into this, now as well. Still hearing the same stuff about Carson Beck. Still hearing the same thing that, as of right now, it seems like, he's leaning towards coming back as far as everything we're hearing. Haven't heard anything different there. I haven't. What about you?
That's the question of the day. What's Carson Beck going to do? I made a note last night. There was a report that Georgia had contacted Malik Murphy. And if that is the case, which it very well could be, I would imagine the contingency on that is if Carson Beck leaves, we would be interested in you. And I think we've made it clear on DawgsHQ that if Carson Beck leaves, Georgia's going to be in that quarterback portal, period. And that's no question. Doesn't mean they're not confident in what they got. But, again, they're opening up with Clemson. So, you know what I mean? That's going to be taken into consideration, and that schedule they got. So, and listen, if Carson Beck were to leave, Georgia's going to be in a very attractive place pretty quick because of what they've got on, especially an offensive line. That's what a quarterback wants to see, coming back. So we'll see. I tend to lean still that Carson Beck is coming back, but again, that's not a final answer now until he says it. That's kind of where we are.
What's funny is as somebody who's done this for a while, the whole shown interest thing, the report out there that Georgia had shown interest in Malik Murphy. I mean, listen, man, that could be a support staffer who knew Malik whenever he was being recruited, could say, "Hey, Malik, I saw you in your transfer portal, buddy. I hope we can talk soon."
Or it's somebody reaching out to his quarterback coach, going, "What's the deal? What's his thoughts?" I get it.
And like you mentioned, Rusty, it's business. It's a business thing, right? Because Malik Murphy's not in no shape, form, or fashion is going to consider Georgia unless Carson Beck leaves anyway. 100%, so Georgia can be completely honest with him. Listen, I don't care if it was Kirby Smart who hit him up. Kirby's going to tell him, "Hey, Malik, if Carson leaves, we're interested. Yep. But we know if Carson doesn't leave, you're not interested. So let's just put that stake in the ground right here, and we'll come back and talk about it later." But it doesn't hurt at all to go ahead and kind of get, your foot in the door there. Any more final thoughts for this week? And I know you mentioned you got some visitors, you got some visitors you're going to talk about here a little bit later on at DawgsHQ. Anything else you want to kind of let folks know about what's coming for us?
Yeah, I just want to, I think people look at the portal right now a little bit and go, well, there's not exactly what we need. Guys, this has just started. Okay. And then listen to me now. It's just started for Georgia. There could be a lot of changes and there's more change on this Georgia roster. There's still a lot there's still a lot going on behind the scenes. So, what's going to happen. And I think we're going to continue to give you on DawgsHQ what we're hearing, what names we're hearing. I'm going to add some names here, probably the next hour and a half, of who I expect to be on campus this weekend. And they're not high school guys. Okay. So that's where we are right now. And this portal is open until January the 4th. So the signing day is next week on the 20th, but another massive, maybe even bigger, as a matter of fact, right now, like this time, maybe even a bigger deal is going to be when that portal closes and when these teams get done with these bowl games, because there's a lot of teams right now, especially the playoffs. Those kids aren't left. Those kids hadn't left those teams yet. Every one of those teams are going to have kids leave that's in the playoffs, and it's not going to start until after their seasons are done. So there's a lot going on too, man.
Yeah, it's definitely not going to kick in gear until those teams are done, just like it didn't for Georgia the last couple of years. Folks are making that comparison. Well, Georgia, Alabama hadn't had anybody leave. Well, Georgia barely had anybody leave too, the last couple of years before the national championship game was over. So they all stay, and they're going to be a part of it.
As soon as that plane landed from the national championship, we started breaking portal news because kids were rolling. So it is what it is, man. And that window is even condensed now. So we'll see.
And by my count, just to wrap up here real quick, because we're about to run out of time. To wrap up, you look at the guys Georgia has committed. If it's going to sign all of those guys or add to it a little bit and add 5 or 6 or 7 portal guys, folks, Georgia via the transfer portal or the NFL draft is going to have to lose about 20 more guys to make room for all those guys. So we're just getting started over at DawgsHQ. Okay. And it has, by the way, thank you to everybody. If you're out there listening and you have joined us, there's a good chance. I feel like we could probably throw a rock and, I walk out my front door and throw a rock and hit somebody that's joined us lately. We've had that many folks kind of come over and check us out, and we appreciate it so much. But for this episode of the Georgia Show AM edition, I'm Jake Rose, Rusty Mansell, and we'll be back with you guys Sunday night.